Those two stations both carried the Mike Huckabee radio show, and we were honored that Governor Huckabee came and spent some time with us year before last. He did a show live in the New Bern Convention Center, and then came over here to Greenville, and we had a big event for him in the Hilton, and he was just terrific. I got to know him on a personal level, and I can tell you he became one of my favorites of all time of the folks that we've had visit us here in eastern North Carolina. And Governor Mike Huckabee, now I think one of the people that has to be taken very seriously for the nomination for Republican presidency, joining us live on the phone this morning in Florida, getting ready to board a plane and head to Iowa this morning. Good morning, Governor Huckabee. How are you?
I'm great, Henry. And listen, I have fond memories of being over in eastern North Carolina with you guys. I miss doing the radio show. I really had a great time with that. But let me just say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm running for office, but the area around New Bern is one of my very favorite places. It's the home of Pepsi Cola. What could possibly be not to like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got a lot of friends over in this part of the country. I'll tell you, I think North Carolina could be one of your strong players here. And, of course, we've moved our primary now to March 15th. And let me start with that. How much, as a candidate, how much is that going to change the strategy with regard to North Carolina? For years, we've thought that North Carolina was a non-entity when it came to deciding who the candidates are going to be. Is moving up the primary to March 15th here going to be a big deal now that North Carolina is now the ninth largest state in the country? Are the candidates really planning and working for North Carolina?
Absolutely, and I think it'll mean that North Carolina will join several other southern states in having a major role in selecting the nominee. So what I'm expecting is that you're going to see a lot more activity on the part of Republican candidates, and most likely even the Democratic candidates if they get a few other than Hillary. But I'm expecting that you're definitely going to see an uptick in the number of candidates that spend time not only in Iowa and South Carolina and in New Hampshire, but they're going to be going through those what we call the SEC states of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi. That'll be on one day, Super Tuesday, and then also North Carolina, which is coming up pretty quickly after that. So, the reason I think this is important, Henry, is because if a person is going to become president, you've got to have a solid base of support in that Republican stronghold of the South and Midwest. You're not going to win the general election by, with California and New York. You're going to win it with a strong base in those southern states, and then picking up states like Ohio, maybe Pennsylvania. So I'm delighted to see this new calendar.
Let me say right out of the gate, we've been talking about the debate this morning, and of course ever since Thursday night. I thought you absolutely elevated your opportunity. That's just my own personal opinion. Frank Luntz's organization, in doing focus groups, said that they thought that you may have actually won the entire debate. You made some great points. You had a great line in your closing, doing the little misdirection on people thought you were talking about Trump, and then you unloaded on Hillary, which I thought was great. And, it's moments like that that make people remember the candidate and what they stand for. It was clever, but it also got your message out, which I thought was very good. So congratulations on your debate performance on Thursday night. I think it really helped you.
Well, I appreciate that, Henry. One of the frustrations of being in a debate is that you're sitting there hearing a question that goes to a different candidate, and you're thinking, boy, would I ever love to have that one.
Yeah.
But it's like playing baseball. When you step up to home plate with a bat in your hand, you don't get to go out to the mound and say, hey, pitcher, put it right here. That's where I'd like it. You have to take what they throw at you. And so we can whine all we want to about, gee, they didn't ask me the questions I wanted. They asked me questions I didn't want. But that's what we sign up for, and I think you just have to be prepared that whatever question is given to you, you have to be prepared for it. Now, here's something I think a lot of people don't understand, and it's a point of great frustration for those of us who are candidates. I often hear, well, I didn't hear many solutions. I didn't hear much depth. Well, guess what? We're given 1 minute to give an answer. We're given 30 seconds for a rebuttal or a follow-up, and quite frankly, it's hard to get into very much detail when the questioner spends more time asking his or her question than I have as a candidate for president in being able to answer it. So it's the nature of the beast, and I don't know if there's a magic way to fix it other than having a 4-hour debate, but it's just part of the process, and when you have that many people on stage, Donald Trump got 10.5 minutes. Most of us got somewhere around 6.5. Jeb Bush got 8.5. Most everybody else was in about that same thing of somewhere between 6 and 6.5 minutes, which is not a lot of total time over 2 hours to get a message over.
It's one of the things that worries me the most, that, I know a little bit about radio and television production, and, I thought Fox did a good job with it, but frankly, it's a show. And with Trump up there, it's become even more of a show, and I think it's minimized the importance of what we're talking about here. We've got to get on with the business of finding a candidate. And, we're spending a lot of time, Governor Huckabee, on a lot of stuff that's not helping the party right now, in my opinion. How do you feel about that? All this Megyn Kelly, Donald Trump stuff over the weekend, I think is very frustrating.
Well, it's especially frustrating if you're a candidate.
I'll
you
bet.
Want to talk about your support for the fair tax, or why you believe that the trade deal is bad for America, or why the Iranian deal is the most dangerous thing this president has done in 7.5 years of being in office. There's so many things that we need to be talking about. Unfortunately, you're right. It is a show. It's about ratings, and of course, with the ratings hitting a record of 24 million viewers, it's probably not going to tone it down. The future debates will probably be focused on what can we do to make this entertaining, to make their fireworks and all sorts of ways to keep the audience tuned in. It's the nature of the beast, and we get it. But if we really wanted to have a forum that I think might help serious voters understand the candidates, it might be good to have a series of half-hour interviews with the candidates facing a panel of thoughtful and serious interviewers asking thoughtful, serious questions. The only problem with that, Henry, is it might have the viewership of PBS. Yeah. And I think that's what everybody fears, is that it would be wonderful answers and thoughtful answers, insightful answers that nobody would ever see or hear.
Let me throw out some issues. I don't want to talk about Donald Trump anymore today. Let's throw out some serious issues that I think this country is facing, and I'm very concerned about this new deal with Iran, and I know you are too. This thing is when you've got Chuck Schumer coming out against Obama and saying, you know what, this was a bad idea. Boy, you got to think that we got problems with this thing.
Well, I really appreciate Chuck Schumer, because in the face of extraordinary just opposition and headwind, he went against the president and his own party to stand up for what he knew in his heart was the right thing to do. And that's commendable. He really acted like a statesman, not just a partisan. I think that's the way it ought to work in Washington. There's several things about this deal that violate the president's own preconditions. He and John Kerry all said that there would be no deal unless there was any place, any time negotiation or inspection provision. Well, it's not in there. They also said that Iran would get no nuclear enrichment capacity. Well, they have a lot of it. They just don't have as much as they wanted, but they have a whole lot more than we would ever want to give them. So we violated that. On and on. If you read the agreement and you read the things that John Kerry and President Obama said leading up to the agreement, it's just stunning how much we gave away and how absolutely little we got from all of this.
No doubt about it. The other thing, the thing that you've really kind of hung your hat on in years past, and you talked about it also in the debate on Thursday night, is changing the IRS code. Now, you've been promoting the idea of the fair tax for many, many years. When the idea first got floated, Governor Huckabee, a lot of people were like, we can't, that's crazy. We can't do that. It's caught on, and people really now believe that your idea of the fair tax is a reasonable and rational way to change the IRS code. And to me, I think that's one of the best things that you've brought to the table for discussion during the presidential debates and the candidacy. Talk about that a little bit, and how you think that would help the economy, create jobs, and change a structure that's just become way too complicated and cumbersome.
Well, the fair tax replaces the current 77,000-page tax code with a simple consumption tax or a sales tax. In other words, here's what would happen. There would be no more payroll deductions, no income tax on corporate or individual income, no tax on anything that we produce or earn, which means you wouldn't pay taxes on dividends, capital gains, inheritance, tax on savings, tax on your income. When you got your paycheck, you'd get the entire paycheck. Nothing would be taken out. You would pay no tax until you went and purchased something, and you'd purchase something and pay the sales tax. Here's what happens. First thing it does, it brings manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. There's an unknown fact that about 22% of everything that we buy that's made in the U.S. has 22% of the cost as taxes that are embedded and invisible to the consumer. So let's say you buy a chair that's made in North Carolina. 22% of the cost of that chair is the tax that we put on labor and capital. Now, if the Chinese steal the design of that chair and make one just like it in China, and they ship it over here, there's no tax on it as it's being produced, shipped, or imported. So you put the two of them next to each other on the showroom floor, and it's pretty obvious which one's going to be the least expensive. You take that embedded tax out so that you pay the tax on the chair, whether it's from China or North Carolina, on the day you buy it. Now you have the ability to bring those chair manufacturers back to North Carolina. There's so many things about the fair tax that make it a really opportunity to transform the economy. Give a new funding stream to programs like Social Security and Medicare. I'm the only candidate on that stage that says that the answer is not cutting the benefits for the people who paid in all their lives. I think that's just a crazy strategy, and a lot of Republicans think that's what we ought to be doing. But it's not the fault of workers that Social Security and Medicare are underfunded. It's the fault of the government mismanaging it. So why punish the hardworking people of America instead of punishing the people who screwed it up? In other words, the government. But the fair tax, I think, would have a transformative effect. And one of the things it really does, you think about being a small businessman. You'd now be able to make business decisions, not tax decisions. And you wouldn't be trying to figure out how to deal with all the complexities of the federal tax code. You would simply be only paying a tax if you bought something at the retail level. Things you buy at the wholesale level would not even be taxed, and it really simplifies it.
Governor Mike Huckabee, and we're just getting started. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon, right? And you've got a long way to go before we get to the primaries in Iowa. Of course, the Iowa caucuses, and the folks in Iowa clearly think a lot of you. But is that where you will now be putting your entire focus for the next few weeks and months on Iowa?
Well, a lot in Iowa, but we're spending a lot of time in South Carolina, and we're also working hard in places like Nevada, which is the fourth early primary state. But because Iowa is first, and we've got a good record and a good organization there, no question that a lot of our time is being spent there. But we're looking at this as how do you win? And quite frankly, a lot of times people look at this and say, oh, what do the national polls say? Doesn't matter, because you're not in the Final Four unless you win the early basketball games. And you're not going to be the nominee and get the pennant and go against Hillary if you don't win those early contests and get the nomination. So you have to look at this as a process, and you have to get to first base before you can steal second.
Well, you won the Iowa caucuses before, so it would be, I think this time around, if you could pull that off, all of a sudden you look like the front runner in this thing, and this thing could get real interesting for you.
Well, that's our hope. We're going to be working hard for that to happen.
Well, I know you got to go. You got to catch that plane to Iowa this morning, so we can't thank you enough. You've been a friend to the program for a long time, and a lot of friends here in eastern North Carolina, and we really enjoyed having you here 2 years ago, and you've always been nice when we've asked you to come on to do it. And Representative Brian Brown. You met Brian. Brian and I rode you over from New Bern to Greenville. Brian has become quite a player in North Carolina politics as a state representative, and we shared a Bojangles biscuit with you in Vanceboro. So.
Absolutely. I mean, what better way to bond with friends than over a Bojangles biscuit?
Governor Mike Huckabee, thank you, sir. Great talking to you, and hopefully we'll get you back on down the road. And best of luck to you as you head toward the Iowa caucuses now. Talk to you soon.